how do you see the expectations around AVOD by your clients now? What are they looking for?
I mean, I think overall our clients are looking for the experience, but also looking for where we can basically scale outside of, what's happening in just the overall video space. So with the linear ratings eroding, how do we find our consumer and our audiences on other platforms? And I think within AVOD, you can definitely do that. I think across all the different vendors that are out there, I think that you have to use tools that you have. I mean, we use the tools that we have in-house to be able to plan against all of the different platforms that actually have advertising. And I think just, constant education on terms of like the platforms that are out there, just because there's more emerging. There's some that are starting SVOD and then have an AVOD platform. So it just depends on how we are discussing it with our clients, and then how we can bring it to them in terms of who has the scale and who has the content. I think in the end, really, it's the consumers following the content. If the content's there, then we can be there.
Cool. So does scale and reach kind of mean anything, or is it just sort of it used to be buying videos incremental reach? Is that changed? How has the equation changed?
I mean, we still want to buy incremental reach, which is definitely where our tool comes into play. And I think that, we can plug in the different AVOD partners, whether it be a Tubi or a Sling or a Pluto, into those into the platform, and it can kick out, what derives actual incremental reach. And as long as we actually input into it some sort of CPM that we can guarantee against, again, using M1 audiences, which I know we've talked about plenty of times before, we can do that across all the different platforms and devices that are out there.
So let's talk a little bit about data and planning for AVOD investment. Where does that stand? What's sort of the best use case now around data and planning for AVOD investment?
I mean, I think in terms of data for us, again, using M1, using our audiences, we have to make sure that data is front and center, and our consumers front and center. So if we know from M1 and our audiences where the consumer is actually viewing content, then we can buy those platforms. If we see that, they're not necessarily on some of those platforms or viewing the content that those platforms hold, then it doesn't make sense for our consumer to be buying those platforms. But I think in that we can build incremental reach, because we're seeing through Ampower where our consumer is in terms of building that incremental reach.
So speaking of consumers, how has consumer preference changed the experience? Issues around ad load, frequency. It's different, certainly, than linear TV. How has that sort of ad experience changed, and perhaps changed your approach to investing?
I mean, it's definitely nice to see a lower ad load. We just did our cable clutter report, and to see the amount of ads that are still actually in those reports is pretty astonishing. So it's nice, I think, to see the lower ad load. I think consumers appreciate that experience. They're not necessarily, consumers are not necessarily looking to avoid commercials. They don't mind commercials, but they want them somewhat personalized to them. That's why I think by using the data that we talked about, if we know our consumers there, we're not necessarily avoiding them and hitting them over the head. I think the one thing in terms of the space is seeing the same commercial over and over again. I was watching a couple of platforms this weekend, and I kept on seeing a couple of the same ads over and over again. And one of them is not a service or a product that I'm actually looking for. So it can be somewhat annoying if it's if the same ad is being consistently served. I do have a funny story. I was watching Tubi this weekend with my son and my husband, and we turned on Karate Kid. He's much into ninja and all that stuff. And it gives you a countdown in the top left corner of the screen, and it says like, 8 seconds till commercial. And so he's 5, so he doesn't really understand it. So like my husband would do like a 3-second countdown and be like, and commercial. And my son thought it was like the funniest thing ever, because he was like, how does my dad know that the commercials are going to start any second now? But overall, I think that they went pretty quickly in terms of the ad load. Some cases there was 3 ads, in some cases there was like 5 ads, but it wasn't upwards of like, I think sometimes there could be like 15 ads in a pot in cable.
And I wanted to ask about AVOD propelling the programmatic ecosystem. What does it look like? What does that marketplace look like for AVOD in terms of biddable media, direct media? How is programmatic playing in the AVOD space?
I think programmatic for us is definitely starting to play in the programmatic space. I think the biggest thing is that we don't want to buy it via open exchange, because that can open up to fraud. But we want to make sure that we are, if we are buying it via programmatic, that we are doing it with PMPs. In some cases, we might buy it direct if it's, a Tubi or a Pluto who has a connection to a larger portfolio. And then in terms of throughout the year, we might actually shift that to programmatic if it makes sense.
And Cara, just some thoughts that you have now. Of course, you're involved with a lot of media investment at dentsu. How do you sort of see expectations around value, ROI, performance around investment? How has that changed? What are some of the expectations of your clients, and what do you as an agency want to deliver?
I mean, we've definitely been seeing that, clients as well as us want better measurement. And I think, want to be able to relate it back to some sort of outcome, some sort of different measurement or currency. We're seeing in linear television, if you've read that, we've had some viewability guarantees with some of the networks. We're definitely looking to, continue the conversations and continue investing against, business outcomes where we can for the clients that are ready to do that. And I think, the biggest thing is really getting that cross-screen measurement set, which I know is a little bit far away, but making sure that we can do that in the ecosystem of holistic video for sure.